Mark Carney is not special. He will lie to win. He will protect his own personal assets, make sure he benefits himself at the expense of Canadians. He's just like every other liberal.
Mr. Scheer, welcome back to Northern Perspective. It's a privilege and an honor to have you on the show, sir.
Well, it's great to be back, and thanks again for giving me this opportunity.
So let's just get right into this. When Mark Carney started his campaign to run as a leader of the Liberal Party, eventually became Prime Minister, almost from the get-go, the Conservatives were asking for Mr. Carney's conflicts of interest to be disclosed. We had comment after comment from Mr. Carney that he wasn't going to be under any conflicts of interest. He didn't have any investments or stocks in Stripe or Brookfield Asset Management. And Canadians were voting under that impression. Now we know, as it were, what the conflicts of interest after we saw these disclosures on the Ethics Commissioner's website. Over 100 companies, 576 odd stocks. What do you make of this?
This is a massive blow to Mark Carney's credibility, and he's done it to himself. As you point out, we were making this call during the election because when Mark Carney became Prime Minister after winning the Liberal leadership, if you think about it, just a couple of 100,000 Liberals chose who is going to be the Prime Minister for 40 million Canadians who didn't have an immediate say. So we were saying from the get-go, it's important that he disclose which companies he has an interest in, which companies would benefit from his political favor if he were to do so. As the Prime Minister has incredible regulatory power. I mean, he can change rules and modify regulations, benefit one company over another without even votes in the House of Commons through regulatory changes. We called on him to release his interests before Canadians voted so that Canadians could judge for themselves whether or not he was too conflicted to be Prime Minister, or if any of the decisions that he had taken in those first few weeks would have violated a code of conduct or ethics. He refused to do that, and he told some very specific lies. He said quite clearly that he only held cash and personal real estate. Now we find out, as you just said, he owns over 500 companies. 91% of those are not even Canadian. He's, if I could just say as an aside, here's a guy who was helping Justin Trudeau implement some of the most disastrous economic policies our country has ever been burdened with. All the while he was getting his money out of Canada and investing in other countries. So I think it speaks to who he is as a person. I don't think Canadians should ever trust anything that comes out of his mouth, because on simple things where he knows he's going to be caught out on, he's chosen to lie. And that tells you a lot about the man as an individual.
Now, one of the things that we caught, and I'm sure others have caught as well, I believe, here, Polly had mentioned this recently, is that during the French debates, he specifically answered a question about, the role of nuclear in the next generation of Canada. And while he was answering that very important strategic question on what he would do and how he would operate as Prime Minister when approaching nuclear, he specifically called out the company Westinghouse. Now, he was still Prime Minister at that point, even though we were in the middle of an election, not just for our viewers' information. So as Prime Minister, not having disclosed his assets, the public not knowing the conflicts of interest, him specifically calling Westinghouse, which he has interest in, during that debate, our thoughts immediately went towards, is this a ethics violation? Did he break ethics laws by actively supporting, during a leadership debate, a company that he had a vested interest in that the public was unaware of? What's your take on that?
Well, I think you've highlighted very well why it was so important for Mark Carney to disclose all of this up front. Mentioning a specific company by name when you're running for Prime Minister, saying that you are going to help foster, help develop, or clear a path for anything really that would benefit that company, without even disclosing the fact that he held an interest in that, and that Brookfield's relationship with that company would have potentially benefited from it. It's a serious problem. This all goes back to, what I don't understand about Mark Carney on this is that all of these things, he had to have known that all of these things would have come to light eventually. There are timelines that kick in where MPs, cabinet ministers, public office holders have to file their disclosure statements, and all of that gets would be made public. So to me, the fact that he was keeping it hidden, I believe he was just trying to minimize this whole corruption angle that the Liberal Party has suffered with for decades now, and he was trying to just sweep all that under the rug and just bury it under what have turned out to be lies. And whether it's the propriety of mentioning a specific company by name that he holds an interest in, whether it's an outright lie, like saying he doesn't hold anything but real estate or cash, or whether it's the fact that for the past few years, he's been one of the privileged few who could protect his money, his personal fortune, dump it offshore into other economies, all the while helping Justin Trudeau raise taxes, raise inflation, penalize entrepreneurs and small business owners. I mean, all the while that Justin Trudeau was punishing Canadian the Canadian economy, burdening it with taxes, regulatory changes. Mark Carney was there helping him. Mark Carney was advising him. All the while, he was protecting his personal fortune, something that most Canadians, the vast majority of Canadians, can't do that. It just speaks to Mark Carney's character, and it's a troubling sign. But and one more thing, if I could just on this point, what it does to me is it tells me that Mark Carney is not special. He's just another Liberal. He's going to try to convince Canadians that he's this guy that rises above partisan politics, and because of his previous jobs that he can, he's going to try to present himself as something different. But in the first few weeks and months of him being prime minister, I believe the biggest takeaway is that he's just like every other Liberal. He's not special. He will lie to win. He will protect his own personal assets, make sure he benefits himself at the expense of Canadians.
Do you think the fact that he has interests in companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Netflix, do you think that completely changes the reframing of him removing the digital services tax now?
Well, these are questions that we would never have to ask if he had done one of two things: either just been completely honest up front, so look, here are my holdings, and I'll put up these ethics screens to make sure that I'm not involved in decisions that could benefit it, or actually do what he claimed to have done, which is dump all his assets. And that's what the Conservatives have essentially been calling for, that the best way to avoid these kinds of conflicts is to truly have a prime minister that can't be in a position of conflict. And keep in mind, Mark Carney has explained how he has benefited himself with his political connections. He was at a forum just a short while ago where he was explaining, before he ran for Liberal leader, he was explaining how he uses his access to policymakers, to public office holders, his personal political connections, to advance regulatory changes that then benefit companies that he invests in. He specifically used the example of a policy in the United Kingdom that all planes landing in British airports have to have a certain percentage of their fuel has to be quote unquote sustainable. So then he helps make sure that regulatory policy changes. And then he goes and invests in one of the only companies that actually produces this kind of fuel and makes a massive return for himself and his investors. So he brags about his play here. This is an MO that he's quite used to. So the fact that now he doesn't have to lobby decision makers. He is the decision maker, the chief decision maker in Canada, is very troubling. And Canadians should be very, very skeptical about everything he does, because he has himself told us what he does when he has political power. He benefits himself and he benefits his shareholders.
And you mentioned the fact that the Conservative Party is calling on him to essentially liquidate his assets. Given what's transpired within Canadian politics in the last 7 months, do you think that there needs to be some changes, permanent changes, when it comes to people that are running for office, do you think in order to avoid any conflict of interest, that politicians, at least the prime minister, should be required to, like Nate Erskine-Smith did, in anticipation of getting a cabinet position he ultimately wasn't awarded, to liquidate all their assets so all they have is cash? That way it would be impossible for them to have any sort of conflicts of interest whatsoever. Do you think that's something that Parliament should look into changing for the future?
Well, clearly we have to do something, because this is not right for a major developed country like Canada. We pride ourselves on up until the last few years, we've prided ourselves as one of the best functioning democracies in the world. We have all kinds of transparency rules, from access to information to proactive disclosure, and we have what has been viewed as a pretty robust ethics regime around federal public office holders. What Mark Carney has done here is he's highlighted he's exploited something that should never have been exploited before, and that is with the timelines, with the way the Liberal leadership race was conducted, with the way that he was able to be prime minister for a period of time. All of those timelines now he exploited to run for office, to convince Canadians to vote for him without having to either liquidate assets or publicly disclose them. So that's something that, I've been an MP now for 20 years, a little over 20 years, and it's amazing to me how it's always Liberals that force changes to these types of regimes, because liberal corruption is like water. It will find a way around. It will always seep down to the lowest level. And here we have Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, exploiting some of these gaps to run for office, to conduct an entire election all the way through election day without coming clean to Canadians, and only getting caught out in his lies after the ballots have already been counted.
And as you just mentioned, MPs have to go through this rigorous process with the ethics commissioner to disclose all your assets, disclose all your debts, etc. Is 100 or over 100 conflicts like unusual? How many conflicts might the average MP see?
Well, that's first of all, yes, it's very unusual to have that many. He's going to have literally everything come across his desk. He's going to have everything from fisheries policies to energy policies to permitting for large infrastructure projects, and he has this many conflicts. It's difficult to comprehend how much he's actually going to be able to work with the ethics commissioner on this. Like, how many ethics screens is he going to have? How much HR and office work is going to be done just to implement these ethics screens, and to make sure that he doesn't find another way around them. Usually you have something. You might have a prime minister come to office, and maybe he has a family business. Maybe he's coming directly from a large industry, and so they might say, okay, anything to do, say, with the forestry industry, the prime minister might have to recuse himself for specific regulations. I believe Paul Martin had an interest in shipping lines, and so he had, I believe at the time, he had some kind of ethics screen around that. So it happens. People come to public life from private life. They work, they invest, they have careers. So it's normal to have a period of transition or a small number of potential conflicts that the ethics commissioner will work with the public office holder to protect. But over 100 after an election in which the prime minister lied about his assets and what he actually owned, I've never seen this before. I don't know if there's a comparable in Canadian history here.
Do you think that some ethics investigations should be opened once Parliament resumes? Because we have a case where he flat out lied to the Canadian public about owning stocks in some of these companies, when we see that he does actually have stock options in them. He brought up Westinghouse as one of his, let's just say, key companies that Canada should look at investing in when moving forward with this nuclear strategy. And he flat out removed a digital services tax that would have affected American companies that he had a vested interest in. All the while, we didn't have any of these conflicts identified. Do you think that there should be ethics investigations open once we get back?
Well, I can tell you that we are pouring through these disclosures with a fine tooth comb. That's our job. It's our job as the official opposition to be dispassionate in our analysis, and on behalf of Canadians, shine a light on all of this. So I know our ethics team. We got a fantastic team there with some MPs that have done a lot of hard work. I mean, think of all the corruption scandals that Conservatives highlighted, whether it was the Arrive scam app or the Green Slush Fund. We work very, very hard to use the tools that are available to us as parliamentarians to highlight this. So I can only tell you that we are working very hard on this. I'll let my shadow minister colleague for ethics to maybe make any official announcements on what our plans are as we come back towards the fall. But we absolutely believe that there needs to be greater scrutiny and greater accountability on what the Prime Minister said versus what the actual reality is.
So we talk about interference, we talk about conflict, we've talked ad nauseum about the fact that the criminal justice system has become a shambles under the Liberal government. You see murderers getting out on bail. You're seeing trials thrown out because judges just don't have time because they have so many cases to deal with. Today, we are seeing the sentencing of Tamara Leach and Chris Barber for a lawful protest that occurred in Ottawa. Yes, it was problematic for people, but there was no violence. There was no serious crimes. There were some bylaws probably violated, but you juxtapose that against the protest against Gaza or in favor of Gaza, and you have all of these people in Canada setting fires, destroying businesses, and nothing happens. You're seeing people literally threaten all the people of Canada by yelling "Death to Canada." What does that say about our justice system? The fact that it looks like we're heading down a very dangerous road of political persecution of people that disagree with the government in power.
Well, I think the Crown's request for this long of a sentence is just completely unjust when you compare it to what other groups are getting and what other criminals are getting when they're convicted of violent crimes. You know, we've seen stories of people convicted of horrible crimes like rape getting conditional discharges because judges are worried how it might affect an immigration application. You're seeing violent protests in our streets where Jewish-owned businesses are being targeted. There's violence breaking out, and the organizers and the promoters of those events aren't even being charged at all. So when you look and I understand that one of the Crown prosecutors, one of the people who was actually tasked with convicting Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, saying that this sentencing request is a complete overreach and totally disproportionate, it tells you that it actually is. And I think what Canadians need to be concerned about is that the government and the Crown, whether it's prosecutors or various levels in various justice departments, don't start having a double standard for certain types of protests, certain types of political views, or people affecting certain kinds of changes are treated very leniently. And another group who's much more peaceful and much more restrained but on the wrong side of the government of the day, getting slapped with this type of ridiculous request. So I believe it's a completely disproportionate sentencing request. We'll see what the judge does. I understand it's coming later on this week, but I don't believe this is fair, and it's very troubling.
We will watch with great interest as we return to Parliament, and hopefully Mark Carney can start to be held to account. Mr. Scheer, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to come on your show.